So I'm going to give you some good advice about giving advice. And I hope that if you take this good advice, you'll never give advice again. This is my hope. We all like to give advice. I love to give advice. I love it so much, and I have really good advice to give. But I don't like to take advice, and I find that somehow other people don't like to take my advice either. It's very odd that. We all like to give it, nobody wants to take it. So when you give advice to a learner, what's the message that you're giving when you give advice? The first message you're giving is, I know better than you. The second is, I have a right to tell you what to do. Another message that you give when you give advice is, you are too stupid, too lazy, too naive to figure out for yourself what you should be doing. And the last message that you give when you give advice is, I'll take care of you so you won't have to think. All of those messages. And what's the result of giving advice? What happens when you give advice? Well, there's several possibilities, most of them bad. The first possibility is you give some advice, the learner takes the advice, follows it exactly, everything goes well, the learner thinks, oh, she is wonderful. And she keeps coming back to you. Every time she needs to make a decision, she comes back to you for more advice because you're so good at giving advice. And that's the best result that you get from giving advice. Sometimes the learner follows the advice correctly, but in fact things don't go well. And the learner blames you, and the next time goes to somebody else for advice, because clearly you don't give good advice. And the learner badmouths you all over town. I did what she told me and look what happened. Turned out to be a disaster. Another thing might happen is that you give some advice, the learner tries to follow your advice, but misunderstands what you said, and things don't go well, and the learner blames you, and you feel guilty. Not a good result. The learner rejects your advice, does the opposite, and things do not go well. And the learner blames you for not being more forceful about giving your advice in the first place. She should have told me what to do. So those scenarios about giving advice, those scenarios that happen when we give advice, really mean that it seems to me it's mostly dangerous to give advice. And the thing is that it's so easy to give advice. When the learner asks me a question, well, I have an opinion about everything. Should I use a pencil or a pen? Well, I know which would be better right away. I know that's a good question, I can tell you. But in fact, it doesn't really matter whether the learner uses a pencil or a pen. But if I say, use a pen, then that opportunity for making a decision and being taken away is, and being, dealing with the consequences of the decision is being taken away. And lots of our learners are being told all the time what to do. Their social work tells them what to do, their social worker tells them what to do, maybe they're living at home still, their parents tell them what to do, sometimes their sister or brother tells them what to do, their neighbor, somebody who's in the gang tells them what to do, somebody's always telling them what to do, and so they automatically will do what you tell them to do. But the advice is to refrain from giving advice. Because when you refrain from giving advice, you make it possible for the learner to develop some decision making of her own or his own. So I'll tell you a story that's partly about giving advice. I had a student once who was supposed to be in math class. I was teaching in a team teaching situation where we had one classroom that was run as a teacher-led classroom, and the other one was a study hall kind of thing. There was a teacher in both places. So this learner was supposed to be in math class, but she in fact was at the computer making a birthday card for her sister. So I come along and say, aren't you supposed to be in math class? And she says, well, I mean, there's some options, right? I want to give her this advice. I want to tell her that why doesn't she go to math class and make her card after math class? Go to math from 1 to 2, make your card from 2 to 3, you'll be happy. And so I can't win in a situation like that, because either she'll say, yes, all right, I'll go to math class. And she goes to math class and she's not happy in math class and she makes everybody in the other math class miserable. Or else we have a little kind of set to right in the study. I don't want to go to math class. And I say, well, you really should go to math class because you're not going to pass your course if you don't go to class, and so on. And so then she says, and then at the end of the day, she doesn't go to math class, but she makes a big, everybody's watching us have this fight, and so there's a big thing in the room, the emotional cloud that I have to work to set right again. And the thing is that if she goes to math class, she'll go home, she comes out of math class, and she doesn't have time to make her card because she has to leave early. I didn't know she had to leave early. She didn't tell me she had to leave early, because I have so much power there in that situation that all she can do is do what I tell her. It's clear that I think she should go to math class and do her card after. She can't say to me, I can't do my card after because I have to go home. She just hoofs around and goes to math class, and then she goes home to the birthday party and she doesn't have a card. And she blames me. It was my fault that she didn't have a card. It's all a big tangle of stuff because I'm trying to give her advice. What I really need to do is say, oh, I see you're making a birthday card. Do you know where the fancy paper is? And let her get on with making that decision herself. Another time I can take her to task about whether or not she's making any progress in math class. But in the moment, my giving her advice doesn't do very much good at all. So what do you do when somebody asks you for advice and you've taken this new resolution never to give advice? Should I? Should I do the questions on the test in order? Or should I pick out the easiest ones and do them first? Well, I got a good answer for that. But what I need to do in order to avoid telling the student what to do, I need to say, well, some people do it one way, some people do it the other way. What's your experience? So I give the student a chance to say, well, last time I just went through them in order and I didn't have time to finish, and I know there were some questions at the end I could have done. So maybe, whatever it is. Or, but your job is to say, well, really, I don't know. Or, what's your experience? So you give the learner a chance to talk out what the options are and make a decision. A learner came to me once and said, so I'm making a no smoking sign for my door. I don't want people to smoke in my apartment anymore. So should I make the sign that says no smoking allowed? Or should I make a sign that says please don't smoke? Well, I say, I had never thought about that before. I never thought about that before. Which of those do you think would make people more likely to butt out? And then she gets to do exactly what we're trying to get them to do all the time, right? To think, to judge, to take into consideration various things, to think, well, I don't know, people might say no smoking allowed, they might get huffy about that, or if you say please don't smoke, they might ignore it. Or as you say, no smoking allowed. There are all those possibilities on the one side or the other. And in the end, it doesn't matter very much. If you try one sign and it doesn't work, you can take it down next week and put up another one, right? But the possibility of the student being able to talk about, on the one hand, on the other hand, I could try this, but maybe this, that's the kind of thing that we're working towards. So you answer that question with a question. Somebody says, here's another fraction question. I'm sorry, they're coming up a lot today. I have to figure out I have to figure out 25% of 85. Should I change that 25 to a decimal or to a fraction? Well, both of those things would work. Which would be more convenient for you? And then they get to say, well, if I'm going to do this in my head, so if I change it to a fraction, then I just have to divide by 4, that's easier. But if I'm going to do it on the calculator, it's easier to make it 0.25 and put it in on the calculator. You know, they have a reason to think. And what you're doing by refusing to give advice is to give them an opportunity to make a decision on their own. Students expect us to give them advice. And so it's that moment you catch yourself when they say, should I do it this way or this way? You say, well, and then instead of giving an answer, ask a question and see if they can work it out on their own. So that is my little lecture on giving an advice. Don't do it. Okay, I'm done. So what do you think about that, about giving advice? What do you think about what I said?
What do you think about it?
Very clever, very clever.
Okay, the one thing that I want to say is